Sefer Devarim is Moshe's final address to Am Yisrael before they enter the land of Israel. In our Parasha, Parashat Va'etchanan, Moshe begins by recounting to the nation the experience at Sinai, their travails throughout the desert over the past 40 years, how those were meant to prepare them for entering the land, as well as giving them several warnings to be wary of the non-Jewish presence in the land of Israel, so that they don't mentally assimilate to the Avodah Zarah mentality. This generation that Moshe is speaking to is not the generation that experienced Sinai or the Exodus from Egypt. It is therefore one of Moshe's utmost concerns to impress upon the nation the eternalness of the Berith, that the Berith was not only made with that generation that stood at Sinai, but with you, the generation that is standing before me. And not only was the Berith made with you, says Moshe, but it was also made with the future generations with whom I will not have the opportunity to speak. The responsibility of those nations entering Israel is to rid the land of all Avodah Zarah and to eradicate the nations living therein who refuse to renounce their alien worship and accept our conditions. It is worth noting that Rambam does not count living in Israel as a mitzvah aseh. Rather, the mitzvah aseh is to destroy the 7 idolatrous nations living in Israel, as it is not the land itself that we are pursuing, but rather having the land as a Jewish haven in which we are free to worship God with a Jewish mindset, live with a Jewish mindset devoid of idolatrous influences. Moshe is worried about how those future generations will fare, and whether they will succeed in their mission. He therefore gives the nation a condensed account of what each generation is to recount to their own children, right, and to pass on to the next generation. Ki ish alecha vincha mahar lemor, ma ha'edot v'achukim v'mishpatim asher tziva Adonai Eloheinu etchem. Right, when your son asks you tomorrow, saying, what are these various types of laws, or what are these various laws that God commanded you, commanded you back then when you were in the desert? And so this condensed version contains all of the major elements of the Jewish story and mission, and the reasons for that mission. I want to go through the various components listed in the Parasha that are the response to the son's question. The components that make up the Jewish story are as follows. 1. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. 2. Adonai freed us from that bondage. 3. He did so with marvelous signs and wonders that were afflicted upon Egypt, Pharaoh, and his household, all before our very eyes. ויתן אדוני אותות ומופתים גדולים ורעים במצרים, בפרעה ובכל ביתו לעינינו. 4. He took us out of Egypt to bring us to the land promised to our forefathers. אותנו הוציא משם למען הביא אותנו לתת לנו את הארץ אשר נשבע לאבותינו. And 5. He commanded us to perform the commandments so that we may fear Adonai. ויסבנו אדוני לעשות את כל החוקים האלה ליראה את אדוני אלוהינו. And why did Adonai do all of this? For 2 reasons. 1, for our own benefit, so that we may live. לטוב לנו כל הימים, לחיותנו כהיום הזה. And secondly, because performing the law as Adonai commanded us is a tzedakah lanu, right? It's for our own betterment. וצדקה תהיה לנו כי נשמור לעשות את כל המצווה הזאת לפני אדוני אלוהינו כאשר ציוונו. So to sum up, the stages of our national story are 1. We were slaves. 2. Freedom. 3. God's wonders before our very eyes. 4. Bringing us to the land of Israel. And 5. Receiving the law. And all of this was done for us. So now going into each one of these components is a little bit beyond the scope of this short video, but I will suffice by saying that the main storyline here is that while we were once slaves to a Pharaoh who enslaved us for his own benefit, God freed us from that bondage and gave us commandments that are ultimately for our own benefit. Keeping the law is more than just mere obedience to a sovereign king. It is obedience to a king who, in both his ultimate wisdom and ultimate benevolence, gave us a law that is not designed for his own benefit, as surely he is above needing anything from us insignificant creatures, but rather for our benefit, so that we may perfect ourselves and attain to truly living. Shabbat Shalom.